there's all these stories about, guys over in Macedonia who are running these fake news sites.
Number 24 is Content Farms in Macedonia.
Бидејќи ако се направи грешка, таа ќе биде кобна. Нема враќање назад.
So Europe need to remain more sexy lady in the world.
Ајде, мајката!
Господа ја чува Македонија и низините граѓани.
The Zoran Zaev government will be spending some $210 million, which is about the entire Macedonian defense budget, to purchase 54 U.S.-built Stryker vehicles. The U.S. Defense Security Cooperation Agency, which had to notify the U.S. Congress of the proposed sale, issued a statement noting, quote, "This proposed sale will support the foreign policy and national security of the United States by helping to improve the security of a NATO ally, which is an important force for the political stability and economic progress in Europe," unquote. In the meantime, coronavirus deaths hit a one-day record of 30 on Monday, March 22, bringing the total number of deaths to 3,503. And there have been 119,828 cases of the virus registered. Hospitalizations are now on a rapid rise in Macedonia, and vaccinations are still next to nothing, owing to the incompetence of Zoran Zaev and his health minister, Vinko Filipče. And new curfews are in place. But hey, those Stryker vehicles! We'll discuss all of this and more on this episode of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. I'm Jason Miko, coming to you from the foot of the Catalina Mountains in Oro Valley, Arizona.
And this is Cvetin in Skopje, Macedonia.
Hey, look forward to those Stryker vehicles. Those are going to be snazzy, I'm not sure what they're going to be used for, to be honest. Do you really need them? I mean, who's going to be attacking you? Maybe they'll just sit in the Army Depot yard, and look nice and shiny, or they can take them for spins around Skopje or something like that. I don't know.
During the last donation, the U.S. ambassador donated something like 1,500 automatic rifles, and some Albanian commented in response, "Well, I hope they're not used against us, like the Macedonian army using them against the Albanians." And I was thinking, okay, it's more likely the other way around, given
exactly
U.S. policy toward Albania in the region, that they'll be used against us. But
that wasn't a donation of the rifles from 2001 that NATO collected from the so-called National Liberation Army. What was it? Antonio Miloshovsky called it Operation. It was called Operation Harvest, but I think he called it Operation Theatrical Harvest or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. But this is, these APCs. This is going to be like an additional defense budget of Macedonia, like 200 million. It's about what we spend on defense annually at the moment. And this is like another budget on top of all of this, added just, to pay off the US and render unto Caesar now that we are a NATO member state. And it's really, really out of this world. We have armored vehicles anyway. It's not something that we lack. And, Russian made, sure, but... it's really a huge procurement just to curry favor with the U.S.
Yeah. Now, interestingly enough, to my mind at least, one of the articles I read about this purchase noted that there are no known offsets, and for our most people don't know what offsets are. So let me just explain just a little bit. So when a wealthy country like the United States sells particularly defense military equipment to another country, particularly a smaller, less wealthy country, Macedonia fits that category. Typically, what is offered are offset arrangements. And I used to know more about them. My mind's a little fuzzy. So let me just read here for our listeners from the National Defense Industrial Association. Offsets. Foreign customers utilize offset arrangements to rebalance any financial or social equity lost in the purchase of defense exports. For relatively smaller economies, that would be Macedonia, the outflow of billions of dollars, or in Macedonia's case, millions of dollars, for large defense contracts invites social instability and political repercussions in the long term. Foreign governments may overlook investing in research and development, domestic infrastructure projects, which is all true about Macedonia, or at least the current government, or defense and commercial manufacturing in favor of short-term security solutions. Interesting. Okay, so two types of offsets. Offsets in defense sales are categorized as either direct or indirect. And so for Macedonia, it would be indirect offsets, actually. And indirect offsets are economic inducements that cover non-defense purchases and investments. So there's a financial incentive from the purchaser side, so that the government of Macedonia, in this case, could have received some economic inducements, so job creation and things of that nature. So to me, it's interesting that the government of Macedonia did not request offsets, which leads me to two points. Number one, they're too incompetent and stupid to even have asked for them, which is entirely possible. Or number two, a bit more nefarious, there was some under the table stuff going on, and arrangements between the government of Macedonia and the seller. In this case, that would be through the United States government, the actual manufacturer, which is not knowing that this government, the Macedonian government, which is corrupt, of course, that is entirely possible on their side, but it would require some nefarious activities on the part of the United States side. Probably not. It's not probable, but it's not out of the realm of the possible as well. So, but either way, it's bad for Macedonia that they did not take advantage of the offsets offered, typically in this very, very large purchase, as you just mentioned, basically a second budget, defense budget. So, anyway, we'll see where that goes. But as I mentioned in the monologue, and I should mention that this is the episode 107 of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. We're recording this on the 23rd of March, Tuesday. Coronavirus cases seem to be up all over Europe. Up in Macedonia, obviously, as I mentioned, 30 dead on Monday, I believe it was, March 22. Record number of cases, curfews in place, and no vaccinations in sight. What's the latest excuse from Vinko Filipče?
They've stopped trying now that a number of European countries have banned AstraZeneca vaccines. Immediately, literally the next day, Filipče announced that there will be AstraZeneca vaccines, a solid quantity coming by the end of March. And everybody was like, oh, come on.
End of March is next week, by the way.
Yeah, I know. And nobody's taking him seriously anymore. We had really a crazy development recently. One of the associations of journalists in Macedonia, MAN, which is more anti-government, the other is practically with the government, and they called people in Serbia and they said, listen, do you have vaccines? And 100 Macedonian journalists registered, and they're now actually going to Vranja, across the border in Serbia. It does not require a PCR test to get there, and they're taking AstraZeneca vaccines. So we're now seeing individual trade unions, organizations organizing people to go to Serbia, which is flooded with all sorts of vaccines. I know people who've been told, by friends, initially it was dual citizens. If you have a Serbian citizenship, you can go there and take the vaccine. By now it's become hey, come on, we'll have a drink, we'll party around town a little, and I'll, hook you up with a vaccine. And there is even a push in Serbia. They're going to open the large fairgrounds for anybody who wants to come. Now, I'm assuming citizens, but now they're already saying no registration needed. So you just, any age group, any, I think even in the US, they haven't reached this stage of no registration needed. And Serbia is there. They have Chinese, Russian, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, all the vaccines.
I can't imagine guys in overcoats on street corners, opening up their overcoat, and they've got this whole array of vaccines in there. Hey,
I was considering. I thought maybe I get wound up in paperwork, if it's going to be valid, if I have to do it again in Macedonia, is our public system going to accept it? And I don't mingle too much with people to be, I thought, okay, listen, I don't have to do it. But, I have people, actually, I know people. And some are even posting on Facebook today that they took up this opportunity, and people are using all sorts of, similar connections. It's becoming widely available, but not in Macedonia, in Serbia.
That is just incredible. For the record, I get my first shot on Friday. And anybody in Arizona over the age of 18 now can get a shot, so get their shots. So we've literally, at least half the state, I'm just talking about Arizona because those are the numbers I looked at most recently. At least half the state already has at least one shot. So you figure that with those who've already had it, those who've been hospitalized, those who are asymptomatic, etc., we're basically reaching herd immunity here in the state of Arizona. So, but I know Europe is flailing and failing. Macedonia is certainly at the bottom of those that are failing and flailing. And it's funny. I had to laugh when you said that they're not even making excuses anymore. It's kind of it's sad. But hey, those Stryker vehicles.
Yeah.
My goodness. All right. Well, let's see here. Over the weekend, Zoran Zaev was reelected the chairman or president, actually, of his party, the Social Democrat Union of Macedonia, or whatever they're calling themselves these days, whatever name change they adopt. And he was he unopposed, or did Boki 13 run against him?
Boki said he'll run, but and Shekirinska said there's going to be a counter candidate or candidates, but nobody who would be in a position to threaten Zaev. Eventually, they decided that even this is too much, and they ran not even a proxy candidate, a fake candidate. Zaev just ran unopposed. VMRO would always, even in the heyday of Gruevski, they would have several distinguished people who had no chance of challenging him, kind of like from outside the party, but somebody would still run. Not this time. There was in SDSM there was absolutely no opposition.
Well, in that he's got good company because as I recall, Ursula von der Leyen, who's the president of the European Commission, was the only candidate for European Commission. So, in that respect, Macedonia, or SDSM actually, is following the guidelines of the European Union in having only one candidate for positions. That's they're taking their cues from the EU in that. So he was reelected. Nobody congratulated him except his erstwhile friend and partner, Boyko Borisov, the Prime Minister of Bulgaria, who's in a tough. Well, they're in an election campaign. April 4 is the election next door in Bulgaria, and as I understand it, there's pressure on Zoki to basically accede to whatever it is that Bulgaria wants. What's going on there?
This would happen all the time with Gruevski. Whenever he would win elections and he would get the mandate again, somebody from the US would call him and say, okay, listen, now you have the mandate. Now use it wisely to change the name, accept the Greek demands, and you'll survive because you have the mandate. Now, Zaev likely initiated this vote several months ago when he gave that Buganes interview wherein he accepted all the Bulgarian positions, but never put them into actual, legislation or, changes to the history books or anything like that. So Bulgaria was livid. But he still faced a challenge because of this from within his own party. So I guess there is no other, common sense explanation why he did all this, why he actually had people go to individual homes to re-register the party members. So they come up with a slimmed down list of about 70,000 actual living people who are not ashamed to say they're members of SDSM. And we put on the registry. Then they said we're going to have a vote electronically so you're safe. Apparently the system didn't work. So they decided that they're going to open up the schools on Sunday and have all these 70,000 people dragged into the schools to vote in person with a huge corona risk. And about 60,000 showed up and voted out of the 70,000 registered. So basically Zaev showed to all the people who were within his own party but saying that he has lost legitimacy after his concessions to Bulgaria, after he was called out by former party leader Branko Crvenkovski, who didn't vote and who is sidelined himself from the party. So Zaev now, he can say, okay, I had nearly everybody on the list vote for me. He won mandate in the parliament a few weeks ago when he was able to collect all the 62 members of his coalition to vote for the government, even though Again, he's now unable to convene the parliament for anything. We have a major borrow and spend program, a stimulus package blocked in parliament for weeks because Zaev doesn't have the votes to convene the parliament. It takes 61 votes, and somebody's either sick or traveling or something. But he showed to VMRO that he has 62 votes. He showed to the opposition in the party that the members are behind him, and literally the next day Boyko Borisov calls him, and they come out with identical statements, Zaev and Borisov, except that Borisov's was more like, we have our common history, and you need to acknowledge this, we need to make a deal as soon as possible. While Zaev said from our, I think it was much more watered down, the part about Macedonia and Bulgaria having the same history, but we'll move on to our European future. It was still there, but it was much watered down. But again, both statements had the comment that this needs to be done quickly. So now Borisov is telling Zaev, you need to deliver before my elections, and you have the mandate to do it, so now, do it.
Right.
So this is what's happening.
Right. Well, and of course, the government of Zoran Zaev is not open. It is not transparent. They refuse to tell the Macedonian public what is going on behind the scenes in terms of their negotiations with Bulgaria, what agreements they've made, etc. I guess the only good news in that is that whatever they agree to and sign can be undone, ultimately, one way or the other. And it's going to have to be. Otherwise, Macedonia will cease to exist over time, as we have talked about many times on this podcast. All right, well, we'll continue to follow that. And in the meantime, of course, we have a census coming up. The actual census in Macedonia begins, I think, April 1, continues through the month. But right now, the government is urging Macedonians to register, Macedonians in the diaspora, to register for the census. And the leader in this, or the leaders...
More specifically Albanians in the diaspora, not Macedonians.
Right, yeah. I was going to say, the leaders in this are not just Macedonian citizens of ethnic Albanian ethnicity, such as the first Deputy Prime Minister Artan Grubi, the former football hooligan. Not just him, but now you've got Edi Rama, who is the Prime Minister of the Republic of Albania, and what's the sort of Prime Minister designate of Kosovo, Kurti. You've got foreign leaders from other countries, or in Kosovo's case, statelets, urging Macedonians of Albanian ethnicity to register for the census, which, number one, to my mind, of course, is domestic interference. And it's also a blatant power grab on their behalf. And as I understand it, so far, according to the State Statistics Bureau, there's 130,000, roughly, Macedonians from around the world that have registered in the census. Many of those are from Europe, where ethnic Albanians who are Macedonian citizens live. Canada, Australia, the United States, where you've got a lot of ethnic Macedonians, are not registering, or I understand boycotting. This is Zaev is actually concerned about this. I understand why the diaspora would not want to register, because they want to stick it to Zaev and they don't trust him, etc. All of that's true. And I don't know. I'm. What do you think? I'm not sure.
Yeah, apparently ethnic Macedonians are not registering. There are low turnouts in Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, while the only party showing some enthusiasm for this are the Albanian parties, especially DUI. They're using institutions such as the Foreign Ministry, Artan Grubi, who is Zaev's practically co-prime minister, going around to Switzerland, to Belgium now. Osman is in Belgium today, ostensibly for a NATO meeting, but I guarantee you that he's going to have meetings with Albanian organizations there and with the diplomats, Albanian diplomats sent in the Macedonian missions to get them to register. And as you said, this, really unbelievable, even by Albanian standards, this picture today with Grubi and Rama with showing the website for Albanians to register. It's really, like a caricature of interference in foreign affairs. And Macedonians in Australia, especially, they're considered, the diaspora in principle are patriotic bunch, and they're really aghast at what Zaev is doing. And Zaev came out and he had a statement calling this a patriotic act. He's head of the Statistics Bureau, like a no-name apparatchik, had a statement today that it's patriotic. If you do not register, you do not love your country, something like that. And coming from these people, these despicable people, it can only have the counter effect on the diaspora to register in even fewer numbers. They're threatening fines against citizens in Macedonia who do not let the commit inside their homes, even though, as we said, the corona numbers are horrific and nobody will be vaccinated, not the census workers, nobody. They're threatening criminal charges against people who organize a campaign to counter the census. So the Levica party is like posting signs calling on people not to register, and it's likely they'll face some criminal charges, even though, they're largely, being a controlled opposition at this point. So it's probably going to be for show to build up their credentials on the patriotic right. But again, there's no reason why it couldn't be all online. So, to remove the coronavirus issue and just register both the diaspora and the people living in Macedonia online. I'm not opposed to having something like accurate census and people registering, but I can completely understand people who don't want to do this for this government, for Zaev, do not want to participate in this sham process. The issue here is that if Albanians fall below 25%, which was the number that was agreed in 2002 after the civil war, then it's going to be a defeat, a political defeat for them. If they fall below 20%, which is the number cited in the constitution as the limit after which extra minority rights kick in the sense they have double voting rights in parliament. This is like a privileged minority rights beyond what the majority of Macedonians have in political way. So if they fall below 20%, it's a complete disaster for the Albanians. That is why they insisted, and Zaev accepted that, given that his government is dependent on the Albanian voters and parties, that immigrants are counted in the census, which makes absolutely zero sense to count people who are citizens but do not live in Macedonia. We have this list. We need a more narrowed down list of people who actually live in Macedonia, so we can plan, development accordingly. So this issue is now off the table. It's agreed that even if they fall below 20% due to their political positioning, nobody is going to, even acknowledge this or reduce their rights. And with the addition of the diaspora, this is guaranteed that they will surpass 20%. So one potential, gain for the Macedonian side has been removed. The other was just to purge the electoral list of Albanians and any immigrants who are long time moved out of the country, but still their names are used for ballot stuffing, especially in Albanian villages in the last hours of elections when it's clear what the government needs, like for the referendum in 2018, how many votes they need. They just sent out people to stuff the ballots in the name of immigrants, people who live in Germany, in Switzerland. Somebody just goes and crosses the ballots and stuffs them in the ballot box. And this is rampant in cases like referendums or presidential elections, when all the Albanian votes go in one direction. And then when it's a competitive race between Albanians, like DUI wants the votes and the Alliance of Albanians wants the votes, it's even led to gunfights between Albanian parties who will get to stuff the ballots. So it's a big issue to remove these people from the electoral rolls, people who actually don't live in Macedonia, or put them on a separate list that, if they vote, it's going to be considered, suspicious, a suspect. There would need to be a double check, like fingerprints or something like that. or passports if they are in the country and eligible to and actually voted. Albanian parties, this is why they want to resist this process, to resist an accurate census, and this is why they're making such a mess out of the whole process, adding dual citizens, adding long-term immigrants, likely counting one same person 3 times in Albania, Macedonia, and Kosovo, possibly even in Serbia. A lot of Albanians have dual, triple, quadruple citizenships. So yeah, it's a huge mess. And the way Zaev insists on having this process completed, even though the corona situation, it guarantees that he does not want he does not want to postpone this process. It guarantees that he does not want a legitimate census, but that the numbers are prearranged. Maybe a Macedonian boycott in the diaspora and some boycott at home will bring Macedonian numbers lower. Adding the diaspora inflate the Albanian numbers, so he will deliver to the all-important Albanian parties who keep him in power, and it's just another of the numerous concessions he needs to keep doing for the Albanians.
Right. Wow. You've covered a lot of ground there. You made some very good points. I would only add that, from my perspective, that what the ethnic Albanians are doing, whether they're citizens of Macedonia, the Prime Minister of Albania, the Prime Minister designate of Kosovo, what they're doing is it's nothing more than a power grab. I mean, Albanians the world over are a very clannish, tribal society. And the social sciences prove that. That's a demonstrable fact, that they're clannish and tribal. Maybe that has something to do with their language. The Albanian language is an Indo-European language, but it is unlike any others. Perhaps that is what contributes to them being so tribal and clannish. And for them, it's very much, in the case of Macedonia, very much a power grab. The problem, in my opinion, and I've spent a lot of time, just to kind of put my own credentials out there, I spent a lot of time in the 90s with the ethnic Albanians of the region, primarily Kosovo, but also Macedonia in my work. And I spent a lot of time in Kosovo, and so I do know their mentality to a certain degree. And while it's a power grab, and while they would prefer to have their own gigantic state, Greater Albania in the region, the problem then becomes is once they've consolidated their power as ethnic Albanians in whatever geographic region or political region, then they start fighting amongst themselves, to your point, what you just mentioned. And again, history and the social sciences prove that because of, to take but one point, the blood feuds, which are declining, thankfully, but they still go on in Albania proper, perhaps in Kosovo, I don't know about Macedonia. But they start fighting amongst themselves. And that's just a fact. We see that every month. There's an example of it in Macedonia, not to mention Kosovo and Albania and other places where they reside, New York City.
Well, Albanians, big part of New York. I'm not even going to say anything about Albanians, and that should say everything you need to know about Albanians.
And so this is not a recipe for a strong and stable state, whether it's Macedonia or Albania, or if you consider Kosovo a state, Kosovo. It creates all kinds of frictions and social problems, and it just isn't good for the stability of the state. And yet, this is what they are gunning for, pun intended. This is what they're aiming for. And to your point about Zoran Zaev, obviously he's going to give them everything they want because they keep him in power, to the detriment of the Republic of Macedonia and the Macedonians. Now, he probably realizes that. I think he knows that. He doesn't care because his main goal is to remain in power, and all of the benefits, quote unquote, that come from that, i.e. corruption. I don't have any answers here, Cvetin, as to what this means long term, except that I don't think it's good for Macedonia or for the Macedonians in the Republic of Macedonia or for Macedonians abroad. I don't know if I would say Macedonians should be registering both in the Republic and outside of the Republic, because, who knows what these, and do we have any idea, let's just say the census goes through and it's concluded at the end of April. Do we have any idea when those numbers will be revealed? Or is it too early?
They're going to massage them. Even now, these 130,000 from the diaspora who are counted, the Bureau will not reveal the share of Albanians and Macedonians.
Right.
In them, I suspect it's like at least 50-50 or even, some advantage for the Albanian side. I don't know. This is going to be such a mess. After it's done, there is going to be an additional, I imagine, an additional process of negotiations, what is revealed, to what extent, and how. So, nobody believes that in the process that we'll get some accuracy or, it's all going to be a political bargain. The fact that they're doing it now, the fact that Zaev got his party members to vote now in the midst of the epidemic, the fact that we had elections again in the midst of epidemic in July, the fact that the US Embassy intervened to call for the importance of having elections in the midst of a pandemic and is now also intervened to say that we need the census. It all really just makes people cynical and say, listen, to hell with this. If we can avoid it, we will. If we can't, we'll just, maybe meet the census teams in front of the building in the open air and, hope for the best and see what happens. They can do whatever they want, and people are just like giving up on expecting anything to work here as it should.
Yeah, well, that's the cynicism. The cynicism will destroy an individual, and it will destroy a country. And I'm sure there's plenty of cynicism amongst the Albanians themselves to the points that I just made. But right now they're doing all they can to bolster their numbers. All right. Well, we'll set that aside for now because we don't have any answers, and this is veering towards, as John Podorets in the Commentary Podcast says, crushing morosity.
The answer is having some pushback. There was a census attempt in 2011, and again, there was not such an explicit inclusion of the diaspora in the census. But immediately there were reports that in Albanian villages, when the census team made of Albanians comes along, and relatives say, okay, we have like 7 people here, but only 2 of us are actually here, 5 are, out. Mm-hmm. But let's count them. Let's have them on the phone, or because it's too expensive to call abroad, let's have them on Skype. So they would try to use like Skype census for their relatives who they would claim are in Macedonia, in fact, would be in Switzerland or Germany. And Nikola Gruevski said, no, we're not doing this. There was push and, back and forth between him and Dewey for a while. And eventually, he said, okay, we're calling the whole thing off. We're not having a census. Better to have a no census than such a forged fake census with, after which we'll again have all these immigrants in the electoral lists and this inflated number of Albanians in the country. But, this meant, you have a proper government which looks after Macedonian interests. You have a political party in power which looks after Macedonian national interests. And this is why he was toppled, and this is why we have Zaev now. And there is no pushback, which is, again, going to bring us in a horrible mess from which no amount of Stryker vehicles is going to pull us out of, because if the core of the country is rotted out, then no nominal NATO membership is going to help us keep the stability of it.
Well, yeah, and again, as we've talked about and I've written about before, the national identity is a national security issue, because if the national identity of the Macedonians is weakened to the point of non-existence or just really brittle, then that invites malevolent actors, namely Bulgaria, Albania, perhaps Serbia, with an interest in literally taking a bite out of Macedonia. And as a NATO member, that's not good for Macedonia, and that's not good for NATO. To your point about Gruevski, Gruevski, for all of his faults, was a patriot and was strong. He had principles. He stood up. Zoran Zaev, obviously, is a quisling. He's only interested in himself and a few people around him. and he will be the death of Macedonia the longer he stays. And the sooner he goes, the better. The sooner that... By the way, is there any news... I saw a news piece the other day about somebody, I think it was a Kosovo journalist, predicting that some Albanians in Macedonia were going to be arrested or something soon. And that led me to be thinking about Ali Ahmeti. Wouldn't be arrested, but, indicted by The Hague. Any more words on that?
This was in Kosovo press. Some journalists there announced this, and this a new Hague prosecutorial institute, because the international community now has a special prosecuting unit in every Balkan country to have politicians to do their bidding. And in Kosovo, the difference is that this is war crimes based, while in other countries it's wiretapping based. And of course, now a lot of Kosovo Albanians work in this institution, and they're leaking. And some journalists said, expect soon that there's going to be a Macedonian, Albanian politician to be indicted. And of course, everybody is instantly thinking about Ahmeti, but yeah, who knows? We'll see. Nothing specific yet.
Right. All right. What else we got?
Well, I guess it's time for our Farmers Picks then.
It is, and I think, Cvetin, we've been on a roll here with Farmers Picks the past couple of episodes, and that's good. And after all the crushing morosity that we just went through with the census and Stryker vehicles and Coronas and Bulgaria, etc., it's always good to end with something positive. And I just kind of dink around looking for stuff about Macedonia on the interwebs, and occasionally I find some good news. And this one is a Rumble video. It's mesmerizing drone footage, shows the true beauty of Macedonia. And the short description is, the stunning winter drone footage was filmed in the Osogolski Mountains near Kocheni, Macedonia. Witness how incredible and unique Macedonia is. Again, this is a Rumble video. The fun thing about Rumble, as we have pointed out to our listeners, is that it was created by Chris Pavlovsky, who is a Macedonian-Canadian entrepreneur and businessman. It's a alternative, the preferred alternative, perhaps, to YouTube. But this is just, and this video appeared to me in my search on Yahoo News, oddly. But it's a Rumble video. It's beautiful. It's set to some beautiful music, and just shows the glory of the Macedonian mountains in winter. And it just proves, to me at least, once again, that Macedonia has much to offer Macedonians and the world.
Yeah, that part is really, really nice. It has even a small, like a ski resort, underdeveloped, much more potential than actually something on the ground. But it has a military airfield up there. That's one of the weirdest things I've seen in my life. Driving up there, they would tell us, "Oh, you can just park at the airstrip." Like, where? Excuse me? And it's like the Yugoslav army built it. Certainly over 1,500 meters, right in the middle of the mountain.
Wow. And
there is an airstrip. Weirdest thing,
Oh, funny.
But
yeah.
It's a very nice place there.
Oh yeah, and it's beautiful. But speaking of snow, today's spring started on on Saturday. Sunday was the first full day of spring, and I understand it snowed there, right?
Yeah, it was especially on the first day of spring. We had like proper snowfall.
Oh, good. Well, enjoy it.
Yeah, we call March the crazy month.
Yeah.
Baba Marta.
Yeah. True spring is coming. Don't worry about that. So.
Politically as well, hopefully.
Yes.
As well as in climate.
Yeah. So, yes, after a long, hard winter. All right. I think that's a full wrap.
Okay, buddy. Well, do this next week.
Sounds good. Good talking to you. Take care.